You have a song in your head, it's a classic. Elvis opens his shows with it. The band kicks in, that driving beat. Then you hear the horns, and Elvis walks out a fireball of energy. It's the song that means the show is starting. It's the song that means Elvis is here. You might think, that must be it. That must be the song that made the great James Burton want to join the band. It's a powerful opener, it makes a statement, but the story is different. It's quieter. It's more personal. It's not about a show opener in Las Vegas in the 1970s. It's about a kid in Louisiana in the 1950s, a kid watching a tiny black and white television screen. What he saw that day didn't just make him want to join a band, it set the course for the rest of his life. It was a promise he made to himself, a promise that took more than a decade to come true. To understand the power of that moment, you have to understand the kid. The kid was James Burton. He was born in Minden, Louisiana, and grew up in Shreveport. This wasn't just any town. Shreveport was a music town. It was home to the Louisiana Hayride, a live radio show that was a major stop for any country musician with big dreams. It was called the Cradle of the Stars. Hank Williams played there, Johnny Cash played there, and a young guy from Mississippi named Elvis Presley played there too. Music was in the air in Shreveport. You couldn't escape it. James didn't want to escape it. He was drawn to it. He got his first guitar when he was a teenager. It was a Fender Telecaster. That guitar would become part of his identity. He didn't play it like anyone else. He wasn't formally trained, he just figured it out. He listened to the blues players and the country pickers. He soaked it all in. And something unique came out. He developed a style that people would later call chicken pickin'. It was sharp, funky, and clean. He could make the guitar talk. He used a flat pick and his fingers, bending strings in ways that sounded like a steel guitar. It was new, it was exciting, he was good, he was very good. So good that by the time he was 14, he was a professional musician. He was playing in the house band for the Louisiana Hayride. Think about that. He was a kid, still in school, playing on the same stage as his heroes. He was backing up guys like George Jones and Johnny Horton. He learned how to think on his feet. The star would call out a song, and James had to be ready. He had to find the right key, the right feel, the right solo, all in an instant. It was the best education a guitar player could get. One day, another musician named Dale Hawkins came through. He had a song, a swampy, gritty, bluesy tune. He needed a guitar player. James was there. He came up with a guitar riff for that song. It was simple, but it was perfect. It was mean. It was unforgettable. The song was Suze Q. That riff, played by a teenage James Burton, became one of the most famous guitar licks in rock and roll history. He wasn't even old enough to drive, and he had already created something iconic. The world started to notice. Word got out about this kid from Shreveport who could play anything, and who could make a Fender Telecaster sound like nothing else on earth. The phone started ringing. One of those calls was from a popular singer, a young heartthrob who also happened to be a TV star. His name was Ricky Nelson. Ricky Nelson was huge. He was on his family's television show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Every week, millions of American families would watch the Nelsons, and at the end of many episodes, Ricky would sing a song. It was a genius move. It was a guaranteed way to get a hit record. Ricky needed a band, and he needed a lead guitar player who could deliver those hits. He heard James Burton play. He knew he had found his guy. So James Burton packed his bags, and he left Louisiana and moved to California. He was still a teenager. He became Ricky Nelson's lead guitarist. And just like that, he was on national television every week. He wasn't just a session player in the background. The camera loved him. People saw him. They saw his quiet confidence. They saw his fingers flying across the fretboard. And they heard his sound. He played the solos on all of Ricky Nelson's big hits. Hello, Mary Lou. Travelin' Man, Lonesome Town. That clean, sharp, melodic guitar you hear on those records. That's James Burton. He became one of the most famous guitarists in the country, even if many people didn't know his name. They just knew his sound. He had a great job. He was playing with a huge star. He was making good money. He was living in California. For a kid from Shreveport, it was a dream come true. He was a success. He had made it. But he still carried a memory with him. A memory of something he saw on that little black and white TV back home. And a memory that was more powerful than any hit record or television appearance. To understand that memory, we have to go back. Back to before Ricky Nelson. Back to before Susie Q. Back to when James was just a kid in Shreveport, soaking it all in. Back to the mid-1950s. A new kind of music was bubbling up. It was a mix of things. It had the backbeat of rhythm and blues. It had the twang of country. It had the soul of gospel. It was loud, it was dangerous, it was rock and roll, and there was one person who embodied it more than anyone else. His name was Elvis Presley. He was from Tupelo, Mississippi. He grew up poor. He loved all kinds of music. He would listen to country on the radio. He would sneak off to hear bluesmen play. He would go to church and hear the gospel choirs. It all went into his head and his heart. When he started singing, it all came out together. It was a sound nobody had ever heard before. He went to Sun's studio in Memphis. He met a man named Sam Phillips. Sam was looking for a white singer who had the sound and the feel of a black artist. He knew that could be a huge thing. Elvis walked in. At first, nothing clicked. He sang some ballads. They were okay. Sam was about to send him home. Then, during a break, Elvis started fooling around. He grabbed a guitar and started singing an old blues song called That's All Right. He was jumping around, full of energy. His bass player, Bill Black, joined him. His guitar player, Scotty Moore, scrambled to keep up. Sam Phillips heard it from the control room. He stuck his head out the door. "What was that?" he asked. Do that again. They did. He hit the record button. That was it. That was the spark. That was the beginning of everything. Scotty Moore was a huge part of that early sound. He wasn't a flashy player like James Burton would become. He was tasteful. He was precise. He used a unique finger-picking style that blended country and blues. He created the perfect framework for Elvis's voice. Without Scotty Moore, there is no early Elvis. He was the anchor. Elvis, Scotty, and Bill started touring. They played small towns all over the South. They played on the Louisiana hayride. James Burton probably saw them there. The crowds went wild. The girls screamed. People hadn't seen anything like it. This wasn't calm, polite country music. This was raw. This was sexual. This was a force of nature. Soon, the whole country caught on. Elvis signed with a major label, RCA. He got a new manager, a shrewd promoter named Colonel Tom Parker, and he went on national television. This was the moment that changed popular culture forever. His first few TV appearances were shocking. He was on the Milton Berle show. He sang a song, and at the end he did this slow, grinding version of it. The camera was on him. He wiggled his hips. The girls in the audience lost their minds. The parents at home were horrified. The newspapers called him Elvis the Pelvis. They said he was vulgar. They said he was a bad influence on the youth of America. The controversy grew. He was booked on the Steve Allen Show. To tone him down, they made him wear a tuxedo. And they made him sing his new song to an actual basset hound. It was supposed to be a joke. It was meant to make him look silly and harmless. Elvis was a good sport. He did it. But he was fuming inside. He felt humiliated. Then came the big one. The Ed Sullivan Show. Ed Sullivan was the king of Sunday night television. His show was family entertainment. It was the biggest stage in America. At first, Sullivan said he would never have Elvis on his show. He thought he was too vulgar, but the ratings from the Burl and Allen shows were undeniable, and Elvis was a sensation. Sullivan couldn't ignore him. He booked him. The pressure was on. Elvis and his band knew this was their chance to show the whole country what they were really about. They weren't a joke. They weren't a novelty act. They were a real rock and roll band. So, on a Sunday night in September 1956, millions of families gathered around their televisions. In Shreveport, Louisiana, a teenage James Burton was one of them. He was watching. He knew who Elvis was. He had probably seen him at the hayride. He knew the records. But he wasn't prepared for what he was about to see. Elvis came out. He looked incredible. He was all nervous energy and cool confidence. The band kicked in. Scotty Moore on guitar. Bill Black on stand-up bass, slapping it like a drum. DJ Fontana on drums, laying down a powerful beat. And Elvis started to sing. It wasn't a ballad. It wasn't a cute novelty song. It was pure, raw, aggressive rock and roll. He grabbed a microphone stand. He leaned into it. He sneered. His legs started shaking. The camera stayed on him from the waist up. And Ed Sullivan was still nervous about the hips, but it didn't matter. The energy was explosive. It was coming through the screen. It was like a lightning bolt hitting living rooms all across America. He wasn't just singing the song. He was attacking it. He was living it. The performance was a direct response to the tuxedo and the dog on the Steve Allen Show. This was him, unfiltered. This was the real Elvis. The music was great. Scotty Moore's guitar solo was sharp and stinging. But it was more than the music. It was the attitude. It was the danger. It was the feeling that anything could happen. It was the birth of a new kind of superstar. And in Shreveport, James Burton was transfixed. He saw it all. He saw the power. He saw the connection Elvis had with the audience. He saw the freedom in the performance. He saw a guy who was breaking all the rules and creating something new. In that moment, something clicked for James. He saw his own future. He saw where he belonged. He turned to his mother and father. He pointed at the screen. He said something that sounded crazy at the time. He said, "I'm gonna play guitar for that man someday." It wasn't a hope. It wasn't a dream. It was a statement. It was a fact. He just knew it. He knew that his style of playing, that sharp, aggressive, funky sound he was developing, would be the perfect fit for that kind of energy. Scotty Moore was brilliant. He was the architect of the original sound, but James Burton was a different kind of player. He was a gunslinger. He heard in Elvis's performance a wildness that matched his own playing. He knew they were meant to be together. His parents probably smiled. They knew their son was a talented musician. But this was Elvis Presley. He was becoming the biggest star in the world. It was a nice thought, a young boy's dream. But the odds were 1,000,000 to 1. And so life went on. James Burton went on to have his own incredible career. He moved to California. He joined Ricky Nelson's band. He became a TV star in his own right. He was defining the sound of West Coast rock and roll. He was busy, he was successful. The promise he made to himself might have seemed like a distant memory. Elvis's career took a different path. He was drafted into the U.S. Army. He went away for 2 years. When he came back, the world had changed. The raw rock and roll of the 50s was fading, the music was getting smoother, and Elvis went to Hollywood. For most of the 1960s, Elvis made movies. He made 3 a year. They were lighthearted musicals, they had fun songs, but they weren't the dangerous rock and roll that had made him a star. The fire was gone. He was surrounded by studio musicians, the best in the business. But he wasn't playing with a real raw band anymore. He was a movie star, not a rock and roller. To many, it felt like he had lost his way. While Elvis was in Hollywood, James Burton was becoming a legend in the music industry. After he left Ricky Nelson, he became one of the most sought-after session guitarists in Los Angeles. He was part of a group of elite musicians known as the Wrecking Crew. These were the guys who played on hundreds of hit records in the 60s. They were musical chameleons. They could play any style for any artist. If you listened to the radio in the 60s, you were listening to James Burton. You just might not have known it. He played on records for the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas, the Monkees, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. He played the iconic guitar parts on Gentle on My Mind by Glenn Campbell. He played on country records from Merle Haggard and Buck Owens. His schedule was insane. He would do 3 or 4 recording sessions a day, every day. He would walk into a studio, look at a chart, and create a classic guitar part on the spot. He was a master of his craft. He had reached the pinnacle of his profession. He had everything a musician could want. Respect. A steady income. The chance to play on some of the greatest songs ever recorded. The dream of playing with Elvis seemed to belong to another lifetime. Elvis was in his movie bubble. James was in his studio bubble. Their paths seemed unlikely to ever cross. But then in 1968, everything changed again. Elvis decided he was tired of the movies, he was tired of the silly songs, he wanted to be a musician again. He wanted to feel that fire. He put together a television special. It's now known as a 68 comeback special. He wore a black leather suit, he got back together with his old bandmates, Scotty Moore and DJ Fontana. They sat in a circle and played the old songs. The fire was back, the sneer was back. The danger was back, he was Elvis Presley again. The special was a massive success. It reminded the world who he was, and it made Elvis want more. He decided to stop making movies. He wanted to start performing live again. Not for a movie camera, for a real audience. He signed a deal to perform at the new International Hotel in Las Vegas. It was a huge gamble. No rock and roll star had ever tried to do a residency in Vegas before. Vegas was for guys like Frank Sinatra. And Elvis knew he needed a new band, a modern band, a band that could rock harder than anyone had ever rocked in Las Vegas. He needed the best musicians in the world. He started thinking about who he wanted, and he needed a lead guitar player, a special kind of player, someone with fire and precision, someone who could handle blues, country, gospel, and rock. He remembered a record he'd heard years ago, a swampy, gritty tune with a killer guitar riff. Susie Q. He asked his people, who was the guy who played guitar on that record? They told him it was James Burton. Elvis said, get him. One day, the phone rang at James Burton's home in California. He picked it up. The voice on the other end said, hello, James, this is Elvis Presley. James thought it was a joke. One of his friends was playing a prank on him. He had friends who were good impersonators. He said, yeah, right. Who is this, really? The voice insisted, no, it's really me, Elvis. They talked for a minute. James started to realize it wasn't a prank. It was really him. The king of rock and roll was on the phone. Elvis told him his plan. He was putting together a new band to play in Las Vegas. He said he had been following James's career for years. He loved his playing, and he wanted James to be his lead guitar player. He wanted him to help put the whole band together. But James was floored. He was honored. But he had a problem. He was busy. He was one of the most in-demand studio musicians in the world. He was already booked for months, maybe years in advance. He had a steady gig playing on a new TV show with a singer named Nancy Sinatra. It was good work, it was secure, Vegas was a risk. He told Elvis he didn't think he could do it. He was already committed. There was a pause on the phone. Then Elvis said, "Well, I hope you and Nancy are very happy together." He was about to hang up. In that moment, everything came rushing back to James. The little black and white TV in Shreveport, the explosive energy on the Ed Sullivan Show, the promise he made to his parents. I'm going to play guitar for that man someday. This was it. This was the moment. The dream was calling him on the telephone. He couldn't say no. He stopped Elvis. "Hold on," he said. "Let me see what I can work out." He made some calls. He got out of his other commitments. It wasn't easy, but he knew he had to do it. He called Elvis back. He said, "I'm in." James Burton handpicked the rest of the band. Jerry Sheff on bass, Ronnie Tutt on drums, John Wilkinson on rhythm guitar, Larry Muhoberac on piano. They called themselves the TCB Band. It stood for Taking Care of Business. And that's exactly what they did. They rehearsed with Elvis for weeks. The chemistry was instant, because Elvis was thrilled. He finally had a band that could keep up with him, a band that could push him, a band that could rock as hard as he wanted to. James Burton's guitar was the centerpiece. His sharp, stinging Telecaster licks wrapped around Elvis's voice. It was a perfect match. A match that had been destined to happen since that night in 1956. They opened in Las Vegas in the summer of 1969. The show was a sensation. It was Elvis reborn. He was in his prime. The voice was stronger than ever. The energy was off the charts, and the band was a powerhouse. James Burton stood to his right, his quiet anchor, unleashing breathtaking solos night after night. The kid from Shreveport was finally playing guitar for the man he saw on TV. The promise was fulfilled. For the next 8 years, until Elvis's death in 1977, James Burton was his guy. They were a team. On stage, Elvis would often turn to James and say, "Play something, James." And James would step up and play something brilliant. That little nod of approval from Elvis was all he ever needed. So, what was the song? What was that performance that set it all in motion? It wasn't the slow, bluesy grind of C.C. Rider, the song that would become their famous show opener in Vegas. That song was important. It was the signal that the magic was about to begin. But it wasn't the origin of the dream. The song that stopped James Burton in his tracks was a bolt of lightning. It was a primal scream of rock and roll. It was Elvis at his most defiant, his most raw, his most energetic. It was the performance that scandalized a nation and inspired a generation of musicians. The song that made a teenage James Burton point at the television and declare his destiny was Hound Dog.